Welcome gamers, Critical Blindside here. Today we're going to be talking about kind of not a taboo subject, but a subject that a lot of people are torn on, which is game scores. Not game reviews. Game reviews, I think, have a unanimous utility within the gaming community. I'm going to be talking about the bastard child of game reviews, which is game scores. I have absolutely no clue still to this day why so many sites rely on a numerical score to rate their video games. And I know that it has a utility. It's very easy to rank a score. It's very easy to align games by their score if you're doing a top 10 or, bottom 10 or whatever it is, which I think the top 10 thing is completely overrated anyway. That's all you ever see anywhere you go on the internet. Top 10 this, top 10 of that, top 15 of this. And it's just, one, it's annoying because it's everywhere. And two, I don't think it conveys really any information at all. Whenever I look at one of these lists, and I know this is how everyone else does it, they just click until they get to the last three, and then that's the ones that they actually read about, or they actually do whatever it is that the list does. So that's about the only utility that I think that game scores have, as opposed to a game review, which actually brings you legitimate information. It conveys a sense that the game is either good or bad, or hey, the story is really bad, but the game mechanics are great. And you could score a game of 50, and the 50 could be because the story is absolutely atrocious. But what if I'm not interested in the story? What if the story is, I couldn't care less. I just want a good shooter or something like that. If game scores were done properly, a Call of Duty would get somewhere around a 50 or something like that. Yes, it has okay game mechanics, and yes, it's a polished game or whatever it may be, but story sucks. The gaming community sucks, all this stuff that's not taken into account on most scores, and they just pump out a 90 or something like that, and then everyone's happy. The reviewers happy, the people who are fanboys about the game are happy, and everyone just goes about their lives. When, lo and behold, a game that doesn't have a reputation comes along and gets a score, so whatever it may be, it could be good or bad, and people either get duped into buying this game, or they never ever pay attention to it because it has a low score and they didn't actually read the damn review because they saw it had a bad score. Also, another quite baffling thing about this game score is outrage over whatever score a popular reviewer or review site gives out. So, if I was playing GTA 5 and I didn't particularly like it, let's say I had problems with this or that, and I lay out my argument concisely and clearly to where everyone can understand it, and let's say I actually had legitimate points. If I give a score of an 80, which is a good score, that's like a B, you know what I mean? This is not like I'm trashing the game or anything. Let's say I gave it a good score, but it just didn't do it for me. If I was to do that, and I was a major critic or something like that, I would get completely blasted. Everyone would start calling me a hack, just because you can't give a game like GTA 5 or something like that a bad score, because it's in this like holy grail of video games and you can't touch it because it's awesome, and it has such a good fan base, and it has such a good history. How could they make a bad game? Well, I kind of got news for you. It happens all the time, and the problem is that I don't know if these critics or our game reviewers are kind of forced into giving a game like that a typical score, but BioShock Infinite, I'm sorry, that game is not good. It completely broke anything but the gunplay, and the gunplay sucks. It feels like you're shooting a pea shooter into the same bullet sponge enemies for 6 hours. I don't understand how someone can do that for as long as the game is and hail it a triumph. You take away all the elemental aspects of it, or you at least bastardize it down. There's no crafting in it, and they pretty much focused on the gunplay, and the gunplay is awful. It just is. And the story, a lot of people hail it as this awesome story. Well, I'm sorry. I watch a lot of movies. I'm a very big movie guy, and That story is like amateur night compared to what you can get with movies. And just because it has a twist ending at the end that you didn't see coming, which I saw it from a mile away, I'm not bragging or anything, but this is not this kind of twist ending story that it had. I'm not going to spoil it for the people who haven't done it, but it's not like revolutionary or anything. And everyone that reviewed it just reviewed this game like it was like delivered to us by Zeus, and I don't understand why. I theorize that it was mostly because people are scared to give a game like that a bad review because it goes so against the community that, you know, their jobs could be at risk, they'll get flamed for it. I mean, you know, this is a real thing, and this primarily is why I think game scores should go away, because if somebody sees an 80 or a 75 on a game like BioShock Infinite or the next Call of Duty game or something like that, one, they're not going to read what you actually have to say, so they're not going to see the points that you make. They're just going to see the score and give a knee-jerk reaction to it. And it's just like that's why movies are no longer rated like this. Yeah, Rotten Tomatoes does it, I know, that kind of thing. But if you, Siskel and Ebert back in the day, they didn't just, I mean, I know they give thumbs down and thumbs up, but they explained why. And the problem is that if you just blast this big number at the top of the screen whenever you click on a review, no one actually reads it unless, you know, one, they agree with the review, or two, if they're just curious. But that doesn't really happen. And to prove this, how many times have you heard a story or your friend or whatever say, oh, did you see this game got that score? Or did you see it got 100%. This game has to be good. It's the only game that got 100% on this site. Well, that doesn't convey any information whatsoever. And to me, that's useless. It's a useless number. One, I mean, yeah, their scale goes up to 100, sure. But what does that mean? Does 100 mean perfection? Does 100 mean that there's absolutely nothing wrong with the game whatsoever? Which, if that's the case, then there should be no 100% games, ever. And some people would agree with that, and a lot of people wouldn't. So there you have this bias. So scores in media and that kind of thing are supposed to convey something that is objective, something that many people can agree on. It's sort of like saying this movie tanked at the box office. That is not a subjective thing. That is not something that's an opinion. Yeah, you can't rate things by how they did in the box office, because, I mean, look at The Big Lebowski. That tanked at the box office, but now it's like a cult classic. So you can't go by, you know, how it did at the box office. But saying that it did not do well at the box office is not a subjective thing. It is completely objective, and it encompasses whether or not it did. This is a factual statement of whether or not it did well or not. The problem is that these scores are based on a completely subjective view of this game. Yeah, you know, you can say certain things about the mechanics and then weigh the game score on that. But if somebody said, like if I was reviewing BioShock Infinite, I would probably give it somewhere around a 65 to a 70. And I would explain about the story, that kind of thing. But here's the thing. The story for me didn't do it for me because it's old and it's been played out. And it wasn't a twist for me anymore because I saw it coming from a mile away, so that completely ruined it for me. However, somebody else, maybe someone who's, I'm not going to say younger, because I'm not going to say people who are young can't see stuff like that coming, but maybe someone who, you know, hasn't watched a lot of movies or watched a lot of psychological thriller movies, you know, maybe that ending for them just completely blew them away and it made the game for them. So I'm going to rate it that because of the story sucks and other things, and a person is going to read that and go, oh man, I'm not going to get this game. You only rated it that. And they're going to completely miss out on a genuine good experience just because they only looked at the score. And I think this is the core problem of game scores. So many of you may be thinking right now, critical blindside. You're doing an awful lot of complaining, yet you're not offering any sort of solution whatsoever. And I agree. I have done quite a bit of bitching in that 9 or so minutes of me rambling on. And yes, I actually do have a solution to this. One, wipe out game scores. Yes, completely wipe it out. Or if you want to implement game scores, implement it in a multifaceted way. And what do I mean by that? Well, don't give a game score that encompasses the entire game. Or if you do, make it to where that game scores an average of many different levels of the game. So give the game mechanics a score, give the story a score, give the art assets a score, give all these individual subcategories a score, and then tally that up and maybe put some sort of modifier on there, like an X factor modifier or like a fun factor modifier that can bring a game like One Finger Death Punch that sucks with art style, sucks with story because it doesn't have any, and brings in that X factor and multiplies that by some sort of amount and helps games like that achieve a higher score. Because yes, if you take a game like One Finger Death Punch or some of these indie games, they're never ever going to get a high score because they don't have stories. The art assets don't look good, or maybe they don't, look high fidelity or whatever it may be. But if you put in this X factor at the end, you could say, hey, they only had, the X factor was they only had 3 guys who developed this, or they only had this budget, or it's only released for $5 or something like that. And then that would multiply it to give it a score that's respectable. But in the end, really what we need to do is just get away from these game scores. Why? Because as soon as you get away with game scores, you then give the eye or give the reader nothing to focus on except for your story, and that's ultimately what you want. I mean, most game reviewers don't spend a week playing a video game and then probably a day or 2 days writing about it to have someone look at a score and move on. Every game critic or every game reviewer wants their review read, and they want it to be discussed, and they want it to be eye-catching, which is why I think some people rate a bad score or a good score, but that's neither here nor there. And again, I'm not attacking game reviewers or game critics or game sites. I'm attacking this bastard system that we have that all it does is make indie games completely at the bottom of the barrel. Why? Because you get a lot of these critics and game score reviewers and all this stuff who would see a game like that and go, oh, it's got no story, it's got none of this, it's got none of that, it's got nothing that these AAA games have, so why in the world am I going to give this a good score? So you kind of have to give it an indie category, and then you separate, then you're then saying that indie games are not in the same realm as AAA games, which I don't think is fair. So, it takes indie games and it takes these small games out, and it completely tramples on them because they don't have this AAA polish or whatever it may be, and you're robbing your viewer or the end gamer from an experience they could genuinely enjoy. And it to me, I think it all stems from the game score. And yeah, you kind of need a way to rank your games or your top 10s or whatever. However, a game score just isn't the way to do it. All it does is it gives somebody a chance to put a score on, and that's all they look at, and that's it. So I just think that we just need to move away from it and get on to conveying why you like the game in a review. And I know this is already done. For every score you see on Metacritic, there's a game review behind it. But if you look at Metacritic, you see that game score in one sentence from a game review, and then if you click on read the full review, you get kicked off to some other guy's site, and he'll have ads all over it, and it might not be compatible with your browser, or it might look weird, and he puts pages on it, so you don't want to scroll through 4 pages to read your review, and you just don't end up reading it. All you do is see this score, and you move on. And you do it. I do it, and I hate that I do. But this is the reason why game scores suck, and this is the reason why major movie reviews and reviewers don't give out movie ratings based on a numerical system. You should be reading the review, and you should say, hey, he didn't like the story. However, I'm not real big on story. Or, I mean, if you're one of the 5 people who has seen my last Crititorial, which was me criticizing the critics who reviewed Yaiba Ninja Gaiden Z, you would see that, you know, one of the major criticisms was the story, and I thought the story was awesome. I thought it was a B movie from the start, and I thought it was hilarious, and I got the jokes, I got what they were doing. They were self-aware bad, and to me that is just awesome. And to a lot of other people, they just saw it as, you know, a cheap, immature thing. So maybe if you rate the story of like a 60, but the game mechanics are good, the art assets look good, and everything else is good, then that would bring the score up to a respectable amount, and then other people could see, hey, oh, he didn't like the story, but oh, I don't really care about the story so much. I just care whether or not the shooting feels good or the combat feels good, that kind of thing. So if we could just at least revamp. If it were up to me, I would do away with scores altogether and come up with some other sort of algorithm or something like that to stack the games. But we just need a different system. And I keep saying, if you look at my other reviews, I keep comparing games to movies and that kind of media. One, movies are legitimate. They have, you know, guilds, and they have all this other stuff that makes it a thing. And games just sort of seem, you know, discombobulated and not cohesive. And I think part of that is because we don't have a Siskel and Ebert for reviewers. We don't have this you know, central body of people reviewing a game. And yeah, that can be good and bad, but what we have is Metacritic, and what we have is a game review score system that is fundamentally broken and is fundamentally biased against things that are not AAA. So I'm going to go ahead and stop ranting now. If you agree with me, great. If you don't, I'd love to know why. You can post comments all day, and you can review me and put a score on me. I don't care. However, if you do agree, go ahead and like the video and share it, do all that good stuff, and hopefully we'll get more than 6 views, like on my last video. That's a goal now, I guess, of mine, is to get into double digits on my videos here. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate everybody who views, and keep on viewing. Subscribe to me, and I'll keep pumping out content. I love doing this, so you'll see more. Anyway, Blindside out, and we'll see you next time.